on that in a second. After that, then we'll have an open conversation around interagency collaboration and movement from IDEA to ADA and PR. And then your final state work time. Also during that period of time between now and when we eat lunch at 12:15 or 12:45, you need to check out. You can keep your stuff in here if you want to. And then we'll eat lunch next door and have a speaker, and then you'll be on your way home. So, Renee graciously offered to come back and spend a few more minutes with us, providing a few more bits and pieces of employment-related findings from NLTS 2 that will help to jumpstart our conversation. So, Renee, thank you.
Okay, so I am going to start with some of the slides that I zipped through yesterday in general, in all students with disabilities. But then I want to share with you the information disaggregated by various kinds of demographics and a few selected disability categories so that you can see what the variation is. Because I think these numbers, when we say all students with disabilities, while they're simple to present, they don't really tell the real story. And so just as a kind of get our brains in gear around employment, remember this was the slide about employment at the point of the time that we interviewed students or their parents. And typically it was students with more significant impairments that were not able to participate in a telephone call. Their parents supplied the information for them. So this data is combined. So we saw employment rising steadily until 2007, and then with the economy going south, so did the employment rates. And the cumulative numbers level off at about 85%. We saw the wages rise steadily, and if you remember, the general population's wages in 2009 on average were $1 more than students with disabilities. But that range is huge, from essentially less than minimum wage to $25, $35, $50 an hour. But on average, we're looking at just over 10. Full-time employment also rose until the economy leveled out for them there. And so we see this leveling out of engagement, as well, over the last 3 years, and whether it be employment, post-secondary ed, or some kind of job training. But now let's look at some of those differences. So these two slides are about gender. And the females are in orange, the males are that blue and white striped business. And so there's a slight difference in working for pay over time. Females tend to be slightly more engaged in raising families, but those are not statistically significant differences. But at the time that we interviewed them, there was a much bigger difference, 51% for females and 64% for males being more likely to be employed. And that difference gets even larger when you're looking at full-time employment. Females more likely to be employed part-time. But probably it's about 2/3 of youth were asked whether or not they wanted part-time employment. Of those who had part-time employment, 2/3 said that that's what they wanted, that it worked for them. So perhaps the being at home, raising a family, working a part-time job made sense for females. And you can see here also a disparity, a significant one, in their hourly wage. So males making closer to $11 an hour. And differences here in engagement overall for females versus males. Now let's look at some racial differences. NLTS 2 compares white, African American, and Hispanic youth. Now there are definitely youth who are Asian descent, Native Americans, but the percentages, the numbers of students in those various categories, even when you lump them all together, aren't in substantial enough numbers for us to be able to reliably report them. So it's not that they've been excluded from the analysis when we look at all students, but they aren't here when we disaggregate. And so you can see here, white is the lavender, African American the stripe, and Hispanic green. And so pretty consistently, white youth have better employment outcomes in terms of their cumulative working pay since high school. Definitely at the time of interview, you can see that 65% of them reported being employed compared to roughly half of youth, of minority youth. Also, full-time employment is more likely for white youth, and hourly wages are significantly better for white youth compared to, in this case, I think it's in comparison with Hispanic youth. And you can see here too that in terms of engagement, the outcomes are significantly better for white youth than they are for minority youth. So I've selected 3 disability categories that will give you an idea of some of the differences in outcomes for youth with disabilities. That they just really are so important to look at rather than focusing in on the overall numbers. And they vary for different reasons. So purple are youth with learning disabilities, the light blue are youth with intellectual disabilities, and then youth with emotional disturbance are the stripy ones. And so the cumulative experience of youth in having employment is much better for youth with invisible disabilities, learning disabilities, and emotional disturbance. Those youth, about 90% of them overall, have had some experience in the work world, compared with 63% overall for youth with intellectual disabilities. Then when you look at when we were actually talking to them on the telephone or the parents, that the distinctions are even more noticeable with students or youth with learning disabilities. 2/3 of them reporting being employed when we were interviewing them, 38% of youth with intellectual disabilities, and just under half for youth with emotional disturbances. And some of the reasons that I can't show in the time I have here, but there are different reasons for that vulnerability around not being employed at that point in time. So we see that youth with emotional disturbance are more likely to be fired than any other disability category of youth, and youth with intellectual disabilities less likely to have been employed for a number of reasons. Again, the full-time employment, which in general we see increasing over time, is something that is a strong finding for youth with learning disabilities, and maybe slightly less so for youth with emotional disturbance, because those youth are also wait and make that point when we get to the wages. And again, really disappointing percentages at 40% for full-time work for young people with intellectual disability. So the wage differences are also noticeable, but really interesting is that we see that the wages for youth with emotional disturbance are actually come out higher. But that's often because they've been working longer. They left school midway through, in their perhaps early teens, and have been in the work world for longer, so may be able to earn higher wages when they're employed. They're less likely to maintain that employment over time, however. And then the lowest wages for youth with intellectual disabilities. And then when we look at the engagement here, it just really shows the very poor outcomes for youth with intellectual disabilities, both since they're having left high school and at the time of that interview. And the numbers with youth with emotional disturbance at that point of time at the interview in 2009 was when the employment numbers were really dismal for everyone in the country, and youth with emotional disturbance with the kind of spotty, cyclical kind of getting hired, getting fired, you see their numbers are down as well. And then just looking at youth who have completed school or not, that here it's not surprising that youth who've completed a high school program, and in this instance it doesn't necessarily mean that they graduated with the highest level diploma. It was very difficult for NLTS to determine that because there are so many different kinds of diplomas from state to state to state. And so the most basic distinction that NLTS 2 could make was that they completed their program as prescribed or they didn't. So this will include older youth with intellectual disabilities who stayed in school after the program was completed but may not have achieved the highest level, graduation or diploma. And so not bad experiences for both high school leavers or completers since high school. And remember, those who drop out of school have work but don't keep their jobs typically. At the time of the interview, though, huge, almost twice as many of the high school completers are employed as those that don't finish high school. And some substantial differences in full-time work and hourly pay. And then here again, it just underscores that finishing school, whether or not it's the academic diploma or some other kind of diploma, is a real plus in terms of post-school outcomes. So I hope that those those slides stimulate some more discussion about employment in your states. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I just want to let you know that the data that I presented both yesterday and today about course taking and school programs is from the latest and last report from NLTS 2. And the data and post-secondary ed is from the latest Wave 5 report regarding students who've been out of school up to 8 years. Both of those are available on the website, or you can get a hardback copy from me by emailing me, and I'd be happy to send you one if you would like one with the pretty pictures on the front. Otherwise, they're totally downloadable from the website. And just a reminder that data tables are also available, so if you have something in particular, there's a really easy, user-friendly, three-step process for you to query some static data tables to look up on the website. Other than Maryland, who had the foresight to augment the sample and collect data along with it, for us to collect data for them for reports. Unfortunately, this is national data and not data specific to your state. But all of the instruments are public access. If you want to use any of those items to collect data for your indicator 14 and that sort of thing, and then be able to compare it nationally, that's certainly a doable kind of thing, and we would welcome any questions at all. Even though the study is over, the website will continue to exist, and we'll be doing secondary analysis for years. So, thanks very much.